first interview. This is our Saddle Up Again series. We'll kind of spread this out throughout the day, but our first interview was with Jenny Carney, and she was with WSP. And I'll let the video do the talking.
All right, welcome, Jenny. Thanks for joining us. It's good to see you again.
Great to see you, and I'm glad to join you from the recent past via this recording, and hope everyone is having a great rodeo.
Yeah, well, thank you, and appreciate you doing this. We know you were busy, but would have had you in person otherwise. But this is great, and this format actually came from your idea, so I'm really excited about it. You were here in person last at our old venue back in 2018, and you had what I think is probably the longest title of a presentation we've ever had, but it's a good one. It's time to focus on water, gearing up for rising costs, water-related risks, and emergent technologies in buildings. All very relevant stuff. Very great presentation. One of the reasons we invited you back because it was one of the best received presentations we've had in our 10 years of rodeos. So we're excited to have you again, but wanted to just start off and see what have you been up to lately?
Oh, what have I been up to lately? Well, the world has definitely changed a bit since 2018, but there's some through lines between what I was up to then, what I predicted then, which I think mostly has manifested, and for the most part, I'm still very much working in the realm of sustainability, a little more oriented towards corporate sustainability and less so kind of the built environment via commercial real estate, which had been my focus at that time. And really I would say everything is at kind of a higher intensity, it seems now, with more elements of the climate crisis turning into everyday realities and implications, much wackier kind of socioeconomic and regulatory backdrop for trying to make meaningful progress in these arenas. But also, I think a lot of signals that when there is collective will, we do have a lot of the technical capability and technology needed to make some big improvements with the world. So I don't know, it's a mixed bag, but I'm still here and still working every day to try to advance sustainability outcomes.
Well, that's a good segue to my next question. One of the other things you touched on was the quality of water in the Chicago River. And 2 weeks ago, there was an article that came out I read in the paper talking about new species of fish and higher biodiversity. And I was kind of curious what you know about all that.
Yes, so the Chicago River, had been one of the kind of world's most polluted waterways during the heyday of industrial activity in Chicago, and like slaughterhouses and sewage. And that level of polluting of the river is what triggered the desire to engineer the river to flow backwards away from Lake Michigan and towards, St. Louis and other downstream facilities. And this is, I think, a hopeful example where there's been over several decades now folks who have been working to call attention to the potential of the river as a remedied waterway. So Friends of the Chicago River, I think, got started in the 70s as an advocacy group to try to, I don't know, get us excited about the idea that the river could be an amenity as opposed to like a grotesque pollution transference system. Over several kind of mayoral administrations in the city, there's been a lot of attention on cleaning up the river, making it into more of a place that people would want to be and recreate, and that has ecological value. And yes, like people actually getting into the river in a city sanctioned organized swim a couple weeks ago is a real milestone achievement for recognizing that cleanup. And I saw that the last time, other than 2 weeks ago, that there was such a swim in the river was in 1927, so almost 100 years ago. There's also much more ecological activity happening in the river with the return of fish species, with beavers in the river, and folks might have heard of Chonkosaurus, which is this gargantuan snapping turtle who's kind of known to hang out on the shore in certain parts of the river. So just really exciting to see kind of an abandoned ecological feature that was so affected by pollution be returned to a healthy state. I think shows that if we have will for making some of these environmental improvements, we can get it done. It might take a few decades, but there's lots of proof points of good outcomes.
But you say a first swim since 1927. I'll say that's the first intentional swimming in the river. We did have a team outing, I think, around 2017 or 18, where a kayak may have overturned and team members might have had to swim a little bit, but now it's a lot safer.
Yeah, this is like an organized group swim that the city would kind of approve happening, and so I'm sure lots of people have incidentally swam in the river since then. And there's still many kind of water pollution related challenges to focus on next. A couple that come to mind is, people I think are aware of ocean plastics, but there's a lot of plastic in the Great Lakes as well, and these might be microplastics that for a while had been put into, like, I don't know, as exfoliants into skin cleansers, or when we have synthetic fabrics in our clothes and then we wash them in the washing machine, you get lots of microfibers that are plastic in nature entering in our waterways. So that's a thing to keep working on. And of course, PFAS, the forever chemicals, are another sort of topic that I think is really heated up in the last couple of years around water quality, soil contamination, and those kinds of things.
Glad there's more focus on water quality. I think just in Chicago, anecdotally, I don't think there's been a lot of focus from people on water because it's been so inexpensive for so long. But just since you were at the rodeo in 2018, the price of water has gone up 25%. And, we definitely see more and more people thinking about, at least consumption-wise, water use, but the quality is extremely important. And, I wanted to ask you a little bit too. You brought up in your beginning here when you were talking about what you've been up to, some stuff more on like resilience and what's kind of going on with the environment and the climate crisis. And I was curious about what you're seeing with insurance. And this is something you touched on before too.
Yes, so I think my 2018 prediction, and this is kind of a softball prediction because I don't know who would have argued at the time that insurance rates were going to go down, but they have been going up quite a bit as there's been more severe disasters that affect lots of numbers of homes. And so home insurance is becoming more and more of a big deal, and I think it's going to get a lot worse from here, but you're starting to see annual increases that are, in the 5-10% per year arena. You're seeing insurers pull out of certain markets. So what had been like kind of national insurers are maybe no longer offering policies in certain areas of the country. And then it becomes an issue of building owners just deciding not to have insurance and maybe self-insuring, which essentially means they would have to have on hand the money needed or the lending potential to cover all of the costs of rebuilding in the event of some destructive natural disaster. Or you have states that have to kind of come up with initiatives so that they can be the insurer of last resort. And You see that mostly happening in places like California and Florida and maybe Louisiana. But premiums are everywhere are affected by rising costs for rebuilding after natural disasters. So even though, state regulators normally try to protect their kind of residents from having to pay through increased premiums, rising costs in other areas, there is still some flow-on effect where here in the, upper Midwest, we are still seeing premium increases that are really about added costs to insurers in other parts of the country. So I think we'll see some regional friction where we have to debate, is it fair for people in another part of the country to be paying increased premiums because folks in California have high risk from wildfires or folks in Florida have high risk from hurricanes? Maybe you'll see fewer of these kind of national insurers and the companies start being more regionally focused so that they don't have to navigate that dilemma of how to kind of spread premium costs across different risk profile locations. And you also, I think, can see how the type of disaster has different effects on premiums. So there's a lot of resources out there that'll sort of show average premiums by state. And if you had to guess, Benny, which two or three states do you think have the highest premiums? And does water-related costs or fire-related costs translate into higher premiums?
Oh, I'd guess Florida, Texas, California.
That's not bad. Florida, Louisiana, California. Weirdly, Nebraska has high premiums. The water-driven risks, which are kind of in the hurricane states, are causing more damage still, even compared to wildfire risks in California. So water flood-related issues is a bigger deal than fire in some sense when you take a look at those average state level premiums.
It makes me think of something that's changing. We look at last year with the Hurricane Helene, and the most devastated community was Western North Carolina, which is 400 miles from where the hurricane came on shore. And typically, you think of hurricane damage as being in that proximity of the coast, but this is significantly far away in a place you'd never expect to have that kind of storm damage.
Yes, and the flooding devastation there was and still is really really terrible. And even absent hurricanes, you are getting these storm systems that kind of stall out and just dump a huge amount of rain in a short amount of time somewhere, and it can be really localized. We saw that this summer. It more, I think, happened around Milwaukee area in Wisconsin, but just 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 inches of rain within a few hours. And that's dramatic. And that's happening with storm systems that aren't related to a hurricane, but that are just moving across the country and kind of stalling out. The hotter air holds more water, and then it all comes down at once, and it's pretty wild.
The hot thing in the real estate world right now in construction is data centers and high intensity data centers, and wanted to see how water's factoring into that.
Oh, this is interesting, and it starts to get into like a pretty complex debate about, is AI kind of provide promise for sustainability because of the computing advancements? Does AI accelerate sort of certain kinds of polluting industries because of the computing advancements? And then what's the actual physical footprint of the cloud itself? Because, cloud computing isn't literally in the cloud, it's in, a boxy building, and they're cropping up in more and more markets around the US. And the the interesting thing, I think, with data center growth is all of the dimensions that it brings with it. A lot of kind of tech companies that are building out data centers also have really ambitious sustainability commitments when it comes to renewable energy and when it comes to water efficiency. I think if you ever look at, for those of you who get involved with renewable energy procurement, the Clean Energy Buyers Alliance kind of tracks deals for who's buying the most renewable energy on a voluntary basis. And it's all the big tech companies that are doing the most to bring new renewables online. And some of that is with the intent of kind of covering the growth in load and demand that their facilities need with new renewables on the grid. But with AI, we're getting to this kind of explosive moment in data center expansion where there might be kind of stall out of decommissioning fossil fuel plants or even expanding natural gas related generation to cover that load growth. And it will show up as increased rates potentially for other types of energy users. A lot of that is mediated by the state level regulatory bodies and then of course the investor owned utilities themselves. And I think you're going to see some interesting posturing from those three main entities about what's really causing the grid challenges that we'll be seeing increasingly. And then you also have the water side of the equation. And this is the part that I think is really interesting because I've been tracking both like growing opposition to renewable energy development as well as data center development. And there's a number of interesting industry surveys that gather community sentiment around these types of developments. And one of the things that there's some things that aren't fully reconcilable, right? And some of it's due to politicization of energy sources. Others might be misunderstanding of the interconnectivity of some of these issues. But a survey that I saw recently kind of put opposition to new infrastructure in this curious, rank order where people in this survey on average, were least opposed to new natural gas facilities of all new kinds of energy types. And then there was kind of more opposition to all other energy types and to data centers. And I thought that was interesting because when it came to data center growth, like one of the things that was coming up as a source of opposition was the amount of water that data centers use. And but energy production systems also use water, right? So people aren't necessarily making the connection about the water use that is embedded in purchased electricity. And if you really care about water use, you should be very in favor of renewables because wind and solar use 0 gallons per kilowatt hour of water, whereas natural gas on average uses about 5 gallons per kilowatt hour. And nuclear, biomass, coal all use quite a bit more of that. Some of my colleagues at WSP a few years back with WRI started to kind of map out protocol and coefficients so that we can better understand and quantify or estimate the water use embedded within our purchased electricity. And where you're getting your energy from really kind of coincides with a huge implication for water consumption. And I don't think people are making that connection yet. And hopefully that will become something that we're all a bit more fluent in going forward.
what do you think the next 10 years look like? You've given a lot of good predictions here on many different fronts, but I'd love to hear what your highlights are.
So maybe this is less of a prediction and more of a hope. But I hope 10 years from now, by 2035, in the US specifically, we can see, look back and see this moment of time as a short-term glitch where we temporarily lost our ability to be unified problem solvers, and that at some point between now and then, hopefully as soon as possible, as a country, we can be more clear-eyed about both what is important to solve for and how to go about it in a constructive way. And if we do that, I think we will see a lot of investment in modernizing our infrastructure, including key utilities like water, like energy, like broadband and computing, since clearly that we're not going to put that cat back in the bag. And I also hope that we've kind of found ways to invest in our built environment so that we have a lot of physical and social resiliency to higher intensity storms. We know how to do all of these things already, and we can find the money if we can find ways to prioritize solving for these things in a way that a majority of folks can get on board with. So that's my hope.
I think that's a great hope and a great prediction, and hopes are the best predictions because you want to make it happen, right? So
yeah,
really, really glad to. Well, thank you, Jenny Carney, for joining us today. This is so great to have you back and great information, and we look forward to having you in the future.
That sounds good. 2035, here I come.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.